And we keep things rolling here on the Sports Cubicle and Sports from the Couch here on WCPT 820 AM, heartlandsignal.com, WSBC 1240 AM, Chicago, and of course on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, and there was a couple of news stories that I wanted to hit on this week's edition of the show, and this is something that is definitely a blast from my childhood, or at least my teenage years of sports fandom. A name that was constantly under the newswire when you were watching SportsCenter or ESPN. You couldn't go a day without hearing the name during the baseball season, and that was Victor Conte. And Victor Conte has passed away at the age of 75. And I feel like for a lot of young sports fans that follow us on TikTok or on YouTube, they may not know this name. It may not have the same type of impact as it would during my childhood. And of course, this was coming during the time of Lance Armstrong and just the entire baseball era and everything in the NFL as always. So this was a pivotal time in my developmental years as somebody who ended up doing something like this for a living. But I wanted to hit on this story from CNN Sports by the Associated Press. Victor Conte, who sold undetectable steroids on elite athletes in baseball and track, has died at 75. Victor Conte, the architect of a scheme to provide undetectable performance-enhancing drugs to professional athletes, including baseball stars Barry Bonds and Jason Giambi, and Olympic track champion Marion Jones decades ago, has died. He was 75. Conte died Monday. SNAC System, a sports nutrition company he founded, said in a social media post it did not disclose his cause of death. And there's a couple of paragraphs I want to read that, again, just for those who weren't alive or of an age to remember this, just how big this was. The federal government investigation into another company Conte founded, the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, yielded convictions of Jones, elite sprint cyclist Tammy Thomas, and former NFL defensive lineman Dana Stubblefield, along with coaches, distributors, a trainer, a chemist, and a lawyer. Conte, who served 4 months in federal prison for dealing steroids, talked openly about his famous former clients. He went on television to say he had seen 3-time Olympic medalist Jones inject herself with human growth hormone, but always stopped short of implicating Bonds, the San Francisco Giants slugger. The investigation led to the book Game of Shadows. A week after the book was published in 2006, Baseball Commissioner Bud Selig hired former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell to investigate steroids. So again, if you are of a certain age and you don't remember the name George Mitchell, or more importantly, the Mitchell Reports, this is why I'm bringing this up, because this was such a part of sports lexicon 15, 20 years ago at this point. The article continues, quote, "The illegal use of performance-enhancing substances poses a serious threat to the integrity of the game," the Mitchell Report said. "Widespread use by players of such substances unfairly disadvantages the honest athletes who refuse to use them and raises questions about the validity of baseball records." Mitchell said the problems didn't develop overnight. Mitchell said everyone involved in baseball in the prior 2 decades, including commissioners, club officials, the Players Association, and players, shared some responsibility for what he called the steroids era. The federal investigation into BALCO began with a tax agent digging through the company's trash. Conte would end up pleading guilty to 2 of the 42 charges against him in 2005 before trial. 6 of the 11 convicted people were ensnared for lying to grand jurors, federal investigators, or the court. Bond's personal trainer, this is also crazy, a name that constantly came up. You talk about making sure you have the right friends. Bond's personal trainer, Greg Anderson, pleaded guilty to steroid distribution charges stemming from his BALCO connection. Anderson was sentenced to 3 months in prison and 3 months of home confinement, and he never snitched on Barry. Finally, Conte told the Associated Press in a 2010 interview that, quote, "Yes, athletes cheat to win, but the government agents and prosecutors cheat to win too." He was also questioned whether the results in such legal cases justified the efforts. And you can read the entire article over on CNN Sports. Victor Conte, who sold undetectable steroids to elite athletes in baseball and track, has died at 75. This was the story. You know, you had the Donaghy story for NBA official betting on games and having the betting scandal. Right now, you have the betting scandal going on with the UFC. We saw what Kash Patel was doing with the NBA. You have sitting head coaches who are getting arrested and former players and all this craziness. The big story of now. And then there was the big story of Michael Vick and the dog fighting ring. This was up there. This was the story. You had track athletes, major baseball stars, grand juries. You had think pieces. You had hour-long specials about this story. It captivated America. It was the thing to talk about. And it seems like so long ago. And how fast the news cycle moves now. I don't know how major of a story or how everlasting it would have been like it was then. But I bring it up because it is interesting to see how history repeats itself. Maybe some of the circumstances change a little bit, but the way and the outcry of certain stories or how much they captivate people still stays the same. And this was one where it was everywhere. It was about everything. And to see how far or how long ago it was really just made me feel nostalgic for a different time of a news cycle. But that was a fascinating time. But check out the entire article over at CNN Sports. We got more coming up on this edition of the Sports Cubicle and Sports from the Couch here on WCPT 820 AM, HeartlandSignal.com, WSBC 1240 AM, Chicago, and on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado.